Welcome aboard, Alec Lasley from Hoosier.com. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you doing?
Lots of questions, baby. We've got lots of questions, and there are lots of opinions, but at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. Who will stay and who will go? Someone's got to stay and someone's got to go if someone comes in. And Indiana's still courting outside players. Dexter Dennis with his visit earlier in the week. Sean McNeil right now finishing up his visit today with Indiana. So obviously they are not done recruiting, which means it's one of two things. Trayce Jackson leaves and they use that scholarship, or if he stays, and I still think he stays, that he's not going anywhere, especially with Oscar Shibwe staying, with Cabot staying from North Carolina and guys like that. I don't see Trayce Jackson leaving. But anyway, if he does not leave, does either of these guys come in or does something else happen? I think that they're missing a piece. I don't think Dexter Dennis is the missing piece. I think Sean McNeil is the missing piece. Their defense last year was the tops in the Big Ten. Their offense sucked. Their three-point shooting sucked. So it is just too obvious to me to plug in the missing piece as opposed to adding defense to what you already do very well at.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at either of those two guys, and one, to kind of go back to your initial point, I think you're going to fill the roster with, one of those three guys, whether it's Trayce Jackson-Davis, Dexter Dennis, or Sean McNeil. I don't think you're going to see Indiana get too involved with anyone else, at least for the time being, right? There still could be a lot of different moving pieces that still happens, but I think for the time being, that's kind of the main core that you're focused on.
What keeps one of these guys from committing?
I mean, nothing necessarily, but again, you just have to look at it. They have 1 year of eligibility left, McNeil and Dennis. So they want to go to a spot where they're not only going to have the best opportunity to increase their likelihood of either playing professionally or winning at a big time program. Right, West Virginia's been down over the last few seasons when McNeil's been there, so he's played in 2 NCAA games, NCAA tournament games, but really hasn't experienced a lot of winning at the super high level in terms of late in the season in big time games. And then at Wichita State, obviously Dennis hasn't really had that ability either. He's played in some NCAA tournament games as well, but neither of them have really gone on deep runs in the tournament, and both of them are guys who are getting looked at from a lot of big time programs around the country. And they're going to make sure that with 1 season left, they're going to go to the place that fits them best and the place where they can showcase their entire skills and abilities. And I think either one for Indiana is going to greatly make them a better program and a better team than what they were a season ago. People want to look at the main outlier between the two guys there, right, is the shooting ability, or at least the consistency shooting between McNeil and Dennis. And while that can be said, right, Dexter Dennis still shot 40% from three as a freshman. Obviously, still a long time ago. Still shot about 35, 36% as a sophomore as well. So he's shown the ability to hit the outside shot. Something can be said to that though when you're one of the go-to players, right? They still have Tyson Etienne, who just declared for the draft at Wichita State. So he gained a lot of that kind of responsibility as a scorer, but still Dennis was relied on to do a lot for that offense. And if you come to Indiana, you're not going to have to do that. You're not going to have to be the guy who puts up 10 to 12 points a game, because they already have that in the pieces surrounding that one lone wing spot there at the 2 or the 3. And if you combine that again with potentially what Miller Kopp could be, what he's shown to be in the past, then I think you still have a really good foundation there on the perimeter, and you get better defensively, which I know a lot of people, just like you said, don't want to talk about the defensive end of the floor. But if you lose Trayce Jackson-Davis, you need to get a lot better defensively on the wing, because you're losing 3 blocks a game. And even if he didn't block those shots, he was impacting so much at the rim that masked a lot of those holes that Indiana had on the perimeter. So I think either way, whichever guard you add there, you're still going to be making yourself significantly better than a year ago. And obviously, a large part of that has to do with also getting Malik Renault just a few days ago as well. So the pieces are really starting to come together for Indiana next year. And I don't think you can really say you're in a lose situation, whatever way Indiana decides to go, or whatever way these guards decide to go.
Yeah, and as I look down at the roster for potential roster for next year, let's say Dexter Dennis or Sean McNeil come here. Well, someone still has to, and Trayce Jackson-Davis stays. I know you don't think that that's a possibility, but I still think that it is. I think it's a great possibility that Trayce Jackson-Davis is here, first of all, before the either other two are. But if that happens and one of those two guys end up at Indiana as well, that means someone has to move off of the scholarship line. And there are ways to do that now. Much easier ways to do that. Like I could see an Anthony Leal stepping down for a season to become a walk-on, but receiving NIL money to offset any scholarship deficiency or any deficiencies like that. And that is a perfectly legal way for them to maneuver that way, where he remains on the team, doesn't lose anything per se, really, because he's not going to get any minutes. Let's be honest. Neither is Logan Duncombe, because if that were to happen, and I look down this roster, and let's say you've got Sean McNeil instead of Dennis. Well, you would have Trayce Jackson-Davis, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Xavier Johnson starting for certain. Probably Sean McNeil, maybe at the I don't know, but you still have Miller Kopp, Malik Renault, Jordan Geronimo, Trey Galloway, Race Thompson, and Tamar Bates. This is that would be a 9 to 10 man rotation that most teams, very few, if any teams, have that in college basketball. But that's something that what he tried to do last year. He would be closer to being able to do that with this kind of rotation setup, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at what the main thing he said last year of why he wasn't comfortable going 9 or 10 deep consistently is because of that inconsistent play that bench had and that rotation had. And really outside of Trayce Jackson-Davis, Race Thompson, Trey Galloway when he was in there, and then Xavier Johnson towards the end of the season, you really had no true consistent minutes from anyone else on the roster there. Talent-wise, just going down that list, that roster is light years above what it was this past year if all those pieces fall into place. But yeah, it goes back to having that one lingering issue, which is a huge issue, is the scholarship availability there. I don't. A lot of people talking about Miller Kopp that they're not going to push Miller Kopp out because there's a reason he's still on the roster as of today. There's a reason that Mike Woodson went out and got him, and it just didn't mesh with Miller Kopp and Parker Stewart, two very similar players. And if
he wouldn't
none of those,
he's not going to leave because you mentioned earlier about he's already burned his transfer and he just wants to get his degree and be done because I don't see a future in pro ball for him.
Well, yeah, and that's why that it's not going to be the case with him. And a lot of people kind of rip on the way that he played last year, but I think. I've said this before, separating Miller Kopp and Parker Stewart and now having just one of those guys on the floor is going to vastly improve, I think, Miller Kopp's game this year. So then it goes down to potentially, right, and I hate to talk about guys losing their scholarships or getting pushed out, but you go down the list to Anthony Leal, like you said, or even Logan Duncombe. Don't see Logan Duncombe happening because there's a reason he was still, rated as a 4-star center, as a top 70 guy in the country. He's super young for his age, so he just needs to continue to build there. And he's a guy who's going to be a very consistent big man in the upper classman years as a junior and senior. So you don't want to lose him because then that just sets you back. Even if Trayce Jackson-Davis does come back, because then you're stuck with just one rotational player for the 2023 class, and so you don't want to do that. And so you look at a guy like Anthony Leal, right, who, I don't think that the coaching staff would approach it in a way of, hey, would you do this for us? I think they would really try to feel him out and 100% make this his decision. At the end of the day, I don't think Anthony Leal could be liked any more than what he is right now by the local fan base. But if he were to do this, that he would, no matter how many minutes he played for his Indiana career, right? I think he'd be able to walk around town and never be able to have to buy a drink or a meal ever again in his life. But at the same time, he still
especially if it brings back that glory that much sooner.
Yeah, and he's still a guy that I think, again, a reason why he saw some minutes throughout last season in crucial games, because there's still part of him that could help this team in the long run. It's just not right now. And so there's still, like I said, a lot of different moving pieces that a lot of good situations that could potentially happen. But, it all starts with which one of these two guards, if they do want to come, which one commits first. And then you kind of play a wait and see game with Trayce Jackson-Davis.
Yeah. And this is an opportunity for Indiana to pull an Iowa State, in essence. Iowa State, I talk about them a lot. They were 2-22 last season, but with the portal, they were able to just completely revamp their team. Indiana has not had to do that, fortunately. But this could be a situation where Indiana takes a substantial jump, but it's with the right player. And I still think that I'm not the coach, but I think that you need a McNeil. You just have to have offense and scoring. I saw someone earlier put up, with Trayce and whomever, Indiana can beat teams 55-51. And that's been a problem for the Big Ten. You can't succeed outside of the Big Ten playing like that. Indiana had a ton of games like that this year because they were defensive heavy, and that's great. Defense wins championships in every sport, but you got to have the offense to go with it, especially in college basketball. And I think we saw that with the other teams that went forward. Indiana they can succeed greatly in the Big Ten, being a defensively minded only team. But to succeed outside of the conference, they're going to have some flair, some offense, some three-point shooting, the ability to guys to get to the rim and make their own shots. And that's where they just have to improve, because competing inside of the Big Ten, that's what Purdue does. They compete inside the Big Ten, and then that's it.
Well, that's what the whole Big Ten, that's what the whole conference does. We've talked about it, many, many times now. Just the style of play is probably 3 to 5 years behind what some of these other teams are doing out in the Big 12 and the ACC, especially with Carolina being that last lone team in the ACC to play the two traditional big guys, and then they switch that up with Hubert Davis. So in the SEC as well, right, with stretch fours, super athletic wings, guys who can play 1 through 4 all over the floor. And that's what Indiana's not had. That's what Mike Woodson is trying to do, because that's the modern game of basketball. And coming from the NBA, that's what you need to do in order to be successful. And at the end of the day, right, Mike Woodson's going to do whatever he thinks is necessary to improve the roster from the year before. And if that is getting a Dexter Dennis, right, I think at the end of the day, you need to be extremely happy in that, knowing that, one, if Mike Woodson, who has a pretty good track record up to this point in recruiting and in kind of building a roster in a very short period of time, that you need to trust what he sees in Dexter Dennis and be able to be extremely happy with that addition. Because again, there's a reason the defending national championship team in Kansas is talking to Dexter Dennis. If they didn't see any need for him, they wouldn't be talking to him. So if a team like Kansas is extremely interested in potentially trying to get involved in this recruitment of Dennis, then as an Indiana fan, you have to be extremely happy and really look forward to having him on the roster if that's the move he ends up making. But when it comes to Sean McNeil, right, I mean, I think the biggest thing is what role is he going to want to play, right? Because if Trayce Jackson-Davis doesn't come back, obviously those are more shots for McNeil, a guy who, again, has been a double-digit scorer the last 2 years, can shoot the lights out of the ball. But there still has to be a very specific role for him if Trayce Jackson-Davis does come back. And he's a guy who really started to play with the ball in his hands a lot more over the last year at West Virginia. you already have two guys who can now create shots for teammates with Xavier Johnson, assuming he plays the way that he did in the last month or so of the season. And then a guy like Jalen Hood-Schifino who can come in and create off of the dribble. So right there, you kind of eliminate the need for having multiple different playmakers on the wing who can put the ball on the floor. You still want to have that, but at the end of the day, that kind of eliminates a little bit of that need. So again, it's going to all come down to specific role for McNeil and Dexter Dennis. And at this point, Dexter Dennis doesn't have any more visits set up. He just came off of his Clemson visit. So we'll see kind of what happens with that in the next, couple of days here. But if he doesn't set up any more visits, I think Indiana is pushing hard enough to get a commitment from him that I think Indiana would probably have the leg up there. Obviously still a lot to play out, but I think that's kind of more the route as of now. And if he wanted to commit today, they would probably take him. And that's just how recruiting goes, right? Whoever kind of takes up that spot first tends to win in the long run. So it may just come down to which one of those two, McNeil or Dennis, if they both want to come to IU, which one commits first.
Tony asks, why would Leo or anyone else agree to that, what we were talking about earlier, giving up your scholarship? Spend NIL money, lose what advantages you get being a scholarship player over a walk-on, and remain buried on the bench, might as well transfer. Well, I mentioned Anthony Leo because he's from Bloomington. He is probably starting to realize his potential for minutes have really already waned, and probably not going to get better until maybe later in his career where he can develop more so, because they're not going to stop recruiting. And they're not going to stop recruiting over people. But let's see, someone Jennifer mentioned his mom works at IU. But again, you do it because it made the team better. That's why it makes the team more successful, and you're still a part of that. That's why I would see it. He's not going to be losing much. You get the NIL money to replace it. That's just an idea that I see as a potential path, because there is no other path if Trayce Jackson-Davis stays, unless someone just simply leaves. And I don't see that now this late, personally.
Yeah, and again, they only have a week to do so if they're going to do that. And Trayce Jackson-Davis's decision is going to last longer than a week. So I think, especially if you hit kind of Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, even maybe Thursday, you'll feel pretty confident if no one else kind of makes a decision here for Indiana. But I think the roster is pretty intact at this point. We'll obviously things can happen, things change in the matter of seconds when it comes to recruiting and when it comes to college basketball. But when it just last point kind of on Anthony Leo, this is a situation where it has to come strictly from him. The coaches can't force him to do this just because regardless of the rules, right? If you were to try to take a Indiana Mr. Basketball, a guy who has been Bloomington through and through for his entire life, and try to take him off scholarship, that would not only just ruin the entire fan base, mood, but also just the recruiting ties in state that Mike Woodson has tried to kind of repair as well. So
I assure you they would do it in the correct manner, to where he appears very happy. But again, this is just an option that I've thrown out there. I'm not saying this is even going to happen. Trayce Jackson-Davis could leave. I don't see that happening. And if he doesn't leave, I think that even though they have him here, where we got to take a break, McNeil would probably be the better fit with him here. I'm still wouldn't be surprised to see Dexter Dennis become the guy regardless.